breathing and movement. And welcome, great cause. So you're coming in from London.
Yeah, coming in from North London. I'm based in North London, where we did actually, I think, the first ever masterclass, didn't we? Do you remember when you came over? What was it? Was it 2016 when we did that first one? And when did the book come out?
Yeah, the
2016,
book the
15?
book came out in 2015, and we kind of lied low for a while. I think I was taking a rest, but yeah, it was. I think it was our first training was London
Yeah,
in 2016, and then you came to Galway as well.
that's right. So
So
then you dragged me over for the first instructor training with
yeah,
Leo, who's still working, Jenny,
yeah.
Tom. Obviously, Tom had been working a lot with you. So yeah, what I think is brilliant is, well, just having that opportunity to have been with you from the start of the oxygen advantage and seeing how it's developed since then.
Yeah, it's great. It's going in a nice direction.
It's what we
I
like.
I never thought breathing is a totally different baby than it was back then, and that's only what 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you notice that in terms of, so you were at, say, the health optimization summit, you were talking with lots of people, you're talking with people all the time. How do you see it with breathing? Do you feel that there's a greater awareness there? What are people looking to get out of it? What do you think drives it?
There's definitely a greater awareness. I think what is driving it is obviously there's more coaches out of there. I think obviously there's a lot of different techniques out of there. I think from my point of view, I'm lucky that I was sort of like involved in breath work without knowing it, if that makes sense. So I didn't come in and go, oh, I'm doing breath work. So if I'm thinking of my background from chi running, doing a personal training careers and being a personal trainer, just coincidentally, I was working with like a guy who knew your work, knew the potato work, and he was teaching me he was a running coach. So he was the first trainer I had who talked about nasal breathing. So this was back, when would this be? Back in like 2007, actually. So ages and ages ago. And he's a cardiophysiotherapist at one of the London's leading hospitals. So he was checking my breath rate as a runner. And then obviously then I got involved with Danny Dreyer, Chi running. A lot, obviously, as you know, the emphasis of that is breathing easy, relaxed running, alignment and relaxation. And I know that Danny's mentioned, you spoke to Danny, didn't you, in the Oxygen Advantage book? So that's how I then that's how we met through Danny. So it wasn't even breath work, was it? Because it was Wim Hof around then. I'm not sure, but there was very
No, he
little
wasn't. No, Wim
out
Hof
there.
came
There's
out in
very little out there.
about 2012. I think is when the Wim Hof method came into scene. I might be a bit wrong there, but yeah. So it's going back. That was really interesting, though. The cardiac thoracic was a physio understanding about,
Yeah.
or at least talking about breathing through the nose during physical exercise. Like,
Yeah, definitely. He's a marathon runner, and he hadn't trained with you. He knew of you through Potato. So he was teaching me the Potato method, or giving me the idea of the Potato method as he was training as a runner. So he works at, or he did work at one of the London's leading hospitals, and he was doing prehab and rehab from people who'd had heart and lung operations. So he obviously knew all his biochemistry.
yeah.
Hopefully he knew all his biochemistry and all about the breath rate and not over breathing and the benefits of nasal breathing in exercise. So that was how I sort of like fell into it. And then obviously with Danny about breathing easy when you're running, and then meeting you and going, all right, now this is really, really adding to what I've already been doing, adding more science, adding more awareness of what we're doing and how it's all working. So that's and what was interesting, you mentioned the Health Optimization Summit. What was interesting there is we were promoting our retreats. We do the Oxygen Advantage instructor training as a retreat. And people were just going, no, it's really nice that we're just talking about basics. It's like, come back to the basics, come back to the simple stuff first. It's not to say don't go and do other stuff, but it's like really focus on the simple stuff, because it's obviously the simple, it's usually the simple stuff that is missing, like breathe through the nose. Do you know what I mean? There's little things like the foundation of OA, nasal breathing where possible, where as much as possible breathe through the nose. And that is just missed in a lot of breath work. And in life, it's just missed. I remember doing my personal training course. We never talked about breath work. And I didn't do a degree, I did diploma, but diploma to the highest level in the UK, nothing on breath work. I did a specialism in lower back pain, nothing on breath work. And then when you start to look at how obviously lower back pain, breath work, all of the breathing is affected by that, it's like, yeah, there's a real missing link here. Because, and it's not that I don't think that people are deliberately, oh, we won't talk about breath work. It's just that it's missed out. It's not focused on. It's not seen as sort of like essential to understand the basics of biochemistry and biomechanics.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that I think it's the perception of breathing training. There's a very poor perception out there. I don't think people actually realize the full potential of it. If they did, they would be taking it on board. And you know, when people talk about pillars of health and they're talking about food and physical exercise, and sleep, of course, gets a lot of traction now, and breathing is getting a lot of traction. And I suppose, Gray, it's coming back as well. Talk into my head, people who are doing breathing. So say, for example, if you have to do a set of exercise in the morning, and then you have to do your physical exercise, and then there's a requirement you're doing your meditation. There's a lot of stuff for people to do.
Yeah.
But our initial conversation was that we were talking about how do you just bring this into your way of life? It's a way of life. So you now work with Qigong. I don't know a whole lot about Qigong, so can you give us a little bit of background? And in terms of bringing breathing, the bigger picture, bringing breathing into no matter what you do, that's to make it accessible for people.
Yeah, so just a little bit of basics on the Qigong that I'm working with. So firstly, what I want to say is there's no way I'm a master or anything like that, and that there's going to be plenty more people out there watching this or listening to this who have got a lot more experience in Qigong than I have. But what really resonated with me is, one, coming from the background of Qi running, which was the basics of energy efficiency, moving with the least amount of effort, breathing with the least amount of effort, and some very, very simple focuses, sort of like Qigong focuses. That really encouraged me to then explore a little bit deeper into Qigong. So it's basically based on an ancient Chinese practice, based on Chinese medicine. There's loads and loads of different forms. Qi means energy. And like you mentioned there, it's like we think of like, right, we say energy. So we got to get food and exercise, and we think of all of those things as energy. But actually, where's the first source of energy is breathing in. So energy, breathing in oxygen. Gong means, some people would say work or cultivation. I quite like the idea of cultivation or a skill. So if you think about energy cultivation, and then tie that to oxygen advantage. What is energy cultivation? Is breathing in the oxygen, and how do we optimize that oxygen that we breathed in into every single cell in the body? It's breathing light, it's breathing slow, it's breathing deep. So it's that foundation, breathing through the nose. What is lovely again about Qigong is you're then bringing movement with it. And the breath guides the movement in a very simplistic way to approach it. And what I find is good about this is that quite often, and I'm sure you know this as well when you're working with people, if you just focus on the breath, a lot of people get stressed out focusing on the breath. And if so, oh no, I've had a few people who are literally like, oh, notice the breath, notice the slightly cooler air coming in through the nose, and they're like, oh my God, I can't do it. Because they're not used to tuning in, that there's no connection, there's no awareness, there's no body awareness. So actually, that can be a big challenge for a lot of people. So actually, if you take away the focus from the breath and put it into a really simple movement that anybody can do, that's a nice way of teaching breathing, but without focusing a lot of attention on the breath. And that, I think, is good. The other thing is it's movement, because again, like you say there about bringing breathing into, how do we encourage people to notice breathing practice as like part of your everyday, not about you have to sit for 20 minutes in the morning and do a breathing practice, which is great if you can. How do you bring that into your everyday practice? And that's another thing about doing some simple movement. Some of it is like stretching, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, nice big wake up yawn or something like that. And if you do one or two of that and a little bit of movement, a little bit of twisting, it can make a big difference just to get people engaged with it.
I suppose the other thing is, if you understand about breathing during movement, you can set up the right factors in terms of increasing oxygen delivery to the tissues, improving your blood circulation, opening up the airways, but also recovery post-movement. And it's not, of course, just Qigong, but it's any movement. And
yeah,
I often think about the yoga student. They go into a yoga class and they're in there with their class, and there's very little instruction on whether, with some instructors, whether to breathe in through the nose, out through the nose, etc. Whether to breathe light, that's often overlooked, really softening and breathing less air to the point of air hunger to help improve blood flow and oxygen delivery. Oftentimes it's the contrary. What's the tradition in Qigong? If you were to peel away the years, how was breathing? Did it get much attention? And if so, what was taught?
So how I've learned it, and obviously I brought in what I've learned from you and from the Oxygen Advantage and from the other breath coaches, is you are breathing light. So say I'm going to really simple example of just doing a simple movement of something like that. I'm not doing big huffy puffy breaths. I'm just doing soft, easy, light breath in, silent, quiet breath out. I'm not even thinking about the breath. And what is also happening is the breath is slowing. And then I'm also, oh, look, I'm creating space here and I'm expanding the rib cage. So I can breathe deep without forcing the breath down there. So that's a really simple movement that anybody can do. So if you go to a yoga class, not knocking yoga or anything, and you get people doing trees and twisting, and a lot of people go to yoga thinking it's like a stretch session, which is great, which in some cases it is, but it's stretch and strength. What I love about it's like the Qigong is the very, very simple movements to start with, where you can just do stuff very, very easily. And because the breath is guiding the movement, if you get to the point where you're holding the breath because you've got pain in your shoulder, you stop. So for that particular movement, so the breath is going, hang on a minute, you've got pain in your shoulder, I need to just to back off. So you're not forcing your body in any particular position. So you're breathing light, slow, and deep in every single movement that you do in sort of like the slow movements. There are elements of the Qigong where you do a cleansing and clearing breath, but it's like the OA. It's like when we're doing sort of like recovery breaths, if you've got to that point where you just need to let go and have that good breath out through the mouth, of that cleansing and clearing, getting rid of the excess CO2, the stale energy or whatever, where we need to occasionally. But you wouldn't do lots of that. You would do some cleansing and clearing, and then you'd bring it back to light, soft, down-regulating, parasympathetic, healing, processy type breathing. So it ties in beautifully with the principles of Oxygen Advantage.
It seems quite nice. It's a technique that would be accessible for everybody. It's not something that's probably in the Western world we want to be seen to be sprinting and to be almost pushing ourselves to the point of massive intensity. But this is dialing it right down. What sort of people do it? Your clients, for example.
So it's a good point you make there about dialing it down, but there's still a lot of power in it. There's still a lot of strength in it, because as you know, there's two ways to intensify a movement. One is to speed it up, and the other is to slow it down. So actually, you do a few of these and you get people going, oh, Jesus, my shoulders. So you feel as if you are doing work. So again, it's one of those sort of like, it may be perceived as easy or soft exercise, and it isn't. There is a real power and there's a real strength to standing and balancing. So there's a lot of isometric contraction in it. Some of the standing postures, you're doing isometric contraction, which is, I would literally read an article today talking about isometric contraction is now great for blood pressure, etc., etc. There's a lot of that in the standing postures. And anybody, as you say, client point of view, anybody finds benefits on it, and that's genuine. And I'm in a privileged position of working with so many skilled and talented people through doing the Oxygen Advantage instructor training. So I'm working with Olympic athletes, strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionalists, voice coaches, and they all without question come back and love the Qigong. And I'm not just saying that. It's like, because for an Olympic athlete, it's giving them that little down regulation. It's how can I calm the nervous system. There's one standing posture which is called bamboo in the wind, where you literally just stand there with your feet together and your eyes closed, and you breathe easy through the nose, and you're almost like let your body find its natural balance, just as we let the breath find the natural balance. So as you say, it works for anybody. Anybody can do it. 80-year-olds can sit and do simple movements, so you make the movement smaller.
And I suppose the other thing is it's a meditation per se as well, because you're not doing it with just your head. You're dispersing your attention throughout the body. So even in that last one there, that bamboo movement, when you stand there, where is your attention? Do you deliberately disperse it throughout the body, or where does your attention go?
So what the idea behind the movements is there's always an intention behind a movement. So for example, the term bamboo in the wind suggests the bamboo behind you. It's like, it's what I focus on there is you're thinking about the strength of the bamboo, but also then the flexibility of that bamboo, because it's actually the combination of strength and flexibility that builds resilience. So you can take that out. If I'm coaching that, sometimes you'll just highlight those points. So you just think about how, if you allow your body to find its natural balance, you're allowing yourself to then heal, thrive, however you want to think about it. This simple movement is called pulling down the heavens or pulling down the sky. So we're not just doing it on lifting weights. You're going, yeah, I'm actually pulling down the energy, or however you want to think it, from the sky, and I'm bringing energy into my body. I'm oxygenating every single cell in my body. So that's how, when I'm doing little movements like that, I will most probably use some of the OA terms where we talk about oxygenation, how with a little pause at the bottom of the breath, you can squeeze energy from the blood into the tissues, because you're getting that little build-up of CO2. I mean, obviously, I won't go into detail like that as you're teaching a movement, but having that intention behind a little pause, a little squeeze of energy. So it's always putting an intention behind a movement, which then ties into that you're in the moment. Whereas somebody sitting there thinking, I need to be in the moment, and their head's all over the place. So I think that's, for me, that's how it works. How it works, just having that reason for movement. And again, with OA, it's like we have we understand why it's important to breathe through the nose. And if you understand and have an awareness of why that's important, that has an effect on how you respond to that. We understand why it's important to breathe through the nose and breathe light, because we get the right balance of CO2 and O2. So once people understand the reason why we're doing stuff, the intention and that sort of like awareness, they know why they're doing it, makes a big difference, I find.
And because our approach is typically like if we're just doing breathing training, we do theory, practice, always. Is that because, say for example, if we do go to I've only done yoga a few times. Sinead just come around here. She hasn't been here in a while because I've been traveling, and she goes through the poses with me. But very often yoga is going straight into the poses. But if you're doing, say, Qigong, do you do a little bit of the theory? I know you're talking about intention, but do you do, say, 10, 15 minutes of the theory in terms of bringing together breathing with the movement so that people then, is it that kind of style?
I suppose it depends what the purpose is, what I'm teaching, what the purpose, who is there, whether it's a group, whether it's a client. I like the experience. I think it's important to give people the experience so they can actually experience what you're doing. So I think what I will tend to do is, if I'm doing sort of like a class with just clients, not doing an instructor training, I will most probably be doing stuff and just explaining a little bit of the theory, because we don't want to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, too.
We don't want to be, I mean, I wouldn't talk about hypoxia and hypercapnic when we're doing a little bit of Qigong movement, because it might not be the right time to mention that. But as I say, you can get that sense of just understanding about, you can highlight the importance of nasal breathing, even just in the bamboo in the wind, or even just in a breath awareness practice. So it's just chipping in, it's just giving them those little pointers as you work through a particular practice. I'm doing some corporate stuff at the minute, so this is slightly different because you've got 8 sessions, so we've got 8 specific sessions. So we'll chat, and then we'll have a little, so the first session is awareness, and then I'll talk a little bit about biochemistry. We'll do some awareness. I'll give them a little bit more understanding about the biochemistry. That's session 1. That's all we need in session 1. I don't overcomplicate things. Session 2, right, where's your diaphragm? Have a little prod, feel the ribs, feel your back. A little bit about biomechanics, show them a graphic of the rib cage movement, and then get them to do something like that and go, right, so now you can feel, oh yeah, my ribs are expanding, my spine is expanding. So you're talking about the biomechanics as you, oh, let's have a little twist. What happens to your rib cage? So I'll talk about that as you're doing a particular movement, because then they can feel it as you're delivering it. Session 3 will then be the rhythmic breathing, the cadence breathing. So why are we breathing 6 breaths per minute in this practice? So give them a little bit of heart rate variability. So you can see there's a little bit of taster of the theory, but predominantly practice. Obviously, it's different if you're then doing instructor training, because instructor training, you're doing loads of theory, but you've got to get them out and practice as well, because it's, as you know, and what I find about the way particularly works well for me as a coach, and the way I've found that works really well for clients, is to do the retreat style. So it's a little bit longer. And it puts people in a creative state as well. So you're not just learning, you're being creative as you're learning. And I find that's a good way of having that space to absorb stuff more mentally as well. So yeah, I say yes to answer your question.
And I suppose, yeah, the retreat, you're really being immersed in it. The people who go to do Qigong, why do they go there? Because I'm still trying to get my head around a little bit. For what reasons? Would they do it for enjoyment, or would they go there for a specific reason? If you were a PT, or if you're going down to the gym, you're probably going down either to get stronger, to faster, fitter, to lose weight or something. There's a specific reason. For Qigong, what's the reason typically?
It's a very good question. So I'm thinking from a point of view of coaching Qigong, I don't think I'm getting people who just come for like, oh, I want to practice Qigong. So I think coming from my background originally as just personal training and running coach, the people I'm working with tend to be coming for general health and well-being, and then it's a bit like the OA stuff is then they don't come and go, oh, I need to learn how to breathe efficiently and how to do Qigong. It's like, I'm coming because I want to feel better. I resonate with you as a coach. And then what I'm saying to them as a coach is, these are the tools that you can use to help build resilience, improve your immune system. These are the studies. Here's all the studies on OA stuff, 20 years of worth of Patrick studies that we can refer to. Here's the studies on Qigong that has really helped people increase vitality. And if you combine the two together, so they're not necessarily coming to do a Qigong class. I think, again, it's ultimately what do people want? And people want to feel better. They want to feel relaxed. They want to feel safe with a coach. They want a little bit more energy. They want to get a little bit fitter. But I think, again, I think the clients I tend to attract, because I stay away from all of these quick fixes, as I know, it's just like, I'm not going to say to people, come and running will lose weight or breath work will lose weight. And maybe I miss a little trick on that. I can't do a 5 ways to increase your whatever. It's not, it doesn't feel authentic to me. And I go from the point of view of we can all grow and we can all get to a stage where we thrive. And that's what I want. I want people to be thriving in what they're doing. If we're constantly pushing, if we're constantly seeking the next goal, we're never going to get there. We're always going to be disappointed. So that's sort of like that's the way I sort of like put a way across to people to say, that's hopefully what I can help you with.
I think it's necessary. It's about down regulation. Society is pushing us enough, isn't it? You know, and to be able to take some time out away from screens, away from the noise, and give ourselves some attention. And I think a lot, it comes back to what you were talking about earlier on, that people do have difficulty getting out of their heads. They do have difficulty putting their attention on their breathing. So you're using the combination of movement and the breath to get out of the head. And do you often find throughout your day, like when I first started bringing in breathing on a personal basis, it was tricky enough because the mind has a tendency to wander. My attention span wasn't great at the time. How is that with your journey? Because I'm just thinking, you got into Chi running and there was a reason for that. It wasn't just about reducing the risk of injury. There's probably a spiritual component. When I use the word spiritual, I'm talking about the ability to bring a quietness to the mind.
Yeah.
That very often in human life, we have a mind that's very, very active, and it's kind of weird. We spent 14 years in formal education and we're not taught how to control it. You know, we're not taught how to be able to step out of thought, to do something with our attention fully immersed on what we're doing. How did you get into it, Cray? Was the quest to help the mind, was that part of it?
That's another good question, because actually, no. So from the Chi running point of view, is I loved running at school. I love cross country running. I love being outdoors and stuff. I wasn't great at team sports. Then obviously, but through your 20s and 30s, that all goes out the window. And then I just wanted alcohol, and I used to smoke. And I think, geez, I used to think what I used to get up to. Who don't?
Well, it's culturally, it was totally different because you're the same vintage as I am, and that's the way it was. You know,
I'm older. I'm much older. I'm really big, next generation to you, I think.
Just no.
But no, so again, it was like 2007, 2008. It's like, Jesus, I've got to get fit. I've got to get back into my fitness. And the only way I found Chi running was because I was really hurting when I was running, and I just found the book. And from the point of view of it was the biomechanics that helped me first of all. So it was the things like quick cadence, lengthen up, so all the very, very basic biomechanics. I went completely the other way around. I didn't have a clue what Chi was, and it was only through sort of like meeting Danny and the people who were teaching Chi running, and then getting a little bit more involved in the Qigong, and realizing the benefits of that, and then having I'm quite happy to say this, but then I think having cancer and having like an operation for cancer, it was bizarre that at that time the Qigong and the breath work really helped me, and I'm convinced that's helped me from the recovery point of view. So that's when I wanted to start. That's when I started getting a little bit deeper involved in that whole sort of like spiritual side of it. But that can be off-putting to some people. So I always will say it's not about, oh, I can feel the energy or anything like that. It's about, first of all, it's movement. Then it's movement with breath. And if that's all you get, that's a great start. It's ease of movement, ease of breathing. And then if that sort of like spiritual element comes into play, that's great. And maybe it will, maybe it won't. But if you can get people moving with ease, breathing with ease, you're there. That's basically it. Being efficient with the movement and efficient with their breathing.
In a way, it's spiritual anyway. Like, what is the definition of spirituality? But being able to bring a quietness to the mind.
Yeah.
Many of us spend how many weeks we are on this planet. I think it's about 4,000 weeks in total on average. It's not a whole lot. And many of us will spend a lot of that time stuck in our head.
Mm.
And when our attention is stuck in our head all the time, we're not getting to see what's all around us. And it's not just about bringing our attention out of the mind and into the body or onto the breath, but it's about changing the physiology. So when you're bringing people's attention out of their mind and into their body, a tremendous and probably the most important byproduct is that you're also bringing quietness to the mind, because as long as you're having some of your focused attention in the body, you're not going to be thinking so much. I think it's huge. I think it's hugely important. I suppose if somebody was to ask me what's the biggest thing that we do with Oxygen Advantage, we use 26 different breathing exercises, but ultimately I think the biggest thing is to be able to bring a quietness to the mind so that you can direct your attention to where you want to direct it and to be able to self-regulate. So that's what you're doing. I'm going to come around full circle though. You were getting hurt while you were running. So was it because you were plodding and striking the ground too hard, or what? Why do you think?
So I think the first coming back to running, I started off at the gym. So I was on a treadmill, and the trainer would give me a mile to run as fast as possible as a warm up, and it's like,
is that a good idea?
No. Hope the trainer's not listening at the minute. So he was like,
I hope he is, so that you learn something from it.
And it was just like, he was like, that's fine. It was like, let's do your cardio, let's get you warmed up, but it was just maybe pushing me too much. And my structure, my musculoskeletal structure wasn't supporting that stress. And that was when I was thinking, right, there must be a way of being more efficient as you're running. And that's when it's like, actually, if you listen to how you are breathing, you can't overwork your body, because you'll be overworking your body if you're gassing out, or if you're holding your breath. You know that your body's in a state where you are maybe pushing it a little bit beyond where you are comfortable at the minute. So if you're gassing out breathing, you're going to injure yourself, or it's going to be sore at least. So if you're following the breath, you're following your effort level. Your body is not. I mean, obviously, you could fall over, something like that. So I'm not saying it's injury free because you're following the breath, but the breath will guide the movement, and that's the same with the running. And so that's what I found now. Now in my running, I had COVID. In March, which is the first, I thought, oh yeah, I'm fine, I got away with no COVID. And then in March, it just knocked me for 6. And it was fascinating how one morning after that, I'd go out and I was fine, run. The next morning I'd go out and it's like, out of breath. And if I wasn't more aware of the breath guiding the movement, I would have gone, oh yeah, I need to push through that. And I knew like, I need just to back off. So I walk, and then the next morning, like, why does it feel so different? That was a real eye-opener about how it really does show that first sign of any overload, whether that's musculoskeletal or neurological, you see it in the breath. And that was a real eye-opener. Whereas
It's
I
like,
didn't have that awareness when I was just bashing through the treadmill. And of course, there's obviously some biomechanical things that help improve your efficiency of movement. That's one thing about nasal breathing when you're running. So a runner will say, well, I can't nasal breathe. It's like, hang on a minute, how efficient are you in your movement? Because if you're not efficient in your movement, you're going to need more oxygen and to actually move. So first of all, it's not just about the breath, it's about efficiency of movement. If you can become more efficient in your movement, then you're not going to need to breathe as much. There was just a fascinating study actually on, it ties in with Qigong, it ties in with what you're saying about taking your mind, taking your mind to the body and out of the head. And it was a study on runners about smiling and about actually relaxing their face. And this again is a really simple Qigong sort of like focus. It's called the inner smile. So you relax your face, relax the jaw, and then the breathing naturally slows a little bit. And that again is your body telling your mind you're relaxed. And they actually did this study, and I think it's on like 24 runners. They did one group smiling, one group relaxing the upper body, relaxing the arms, and another group grimacing. And actually the people who were smiling were more efficient. So I think it was something like 2% increase in efficiency. And that was fascinating because that's the body telling your mind you can relax. So that's another way of getting out of your mind, just by relaxing.
wow. And the smiling group got locked.
More
They got,
efficient.
and also they got locked up afterwards for
Enjoying themselves too much. But I've had that. I think I remember
I
doing
can only imagine it, Gray, running through the park. You've got 24 runners.
It's
I don't know.
powerful. I've done like a group. Well, you do get a group walking and nasal
Yeah.
breathing. There's a real power to it. So you see a group of people walking towards you. They're not talking. They're just breathing through the nose. There's a real strength in that. There's a real power to it. So yeah, you
Well,
don't.
probably it
Go
gets
on.
attention. It gets attention because nobody is doing it. You know, if you've got a group of people that are talking to each other, when you first start off, because a lot of people think about nasal breathing during running or during any movement, it's a little bit tricky at the start, but that's where you have to listen to the body and what to expect. So when you're guiding your runners through that aspect of it.
So I remember doing one, it was an online session, and I was talking about nasal breathing, the benefits of nasal breathing. And one person put their hand up, or whatever you do online, and she said, oh, does that mean closing your mouth? And I was like, yeah. And again, I was thinking maybe I was making it a little bit, sometimes you can be complicating things by, oh, you need to nasal breathe. So people start doing all of these weird trying to breathe in a particular way. And that really, I always go back to that person who never done any of my sessions before, was new to the session. And it was just like, yeah, just relax the face, close the mouth, walk, and then take it into an easy run. And this is how I always start people off. Take it into an easy run. This is where obviously a little bit of biomechanics comes into it, because an easy run isn't plodding. It's nice, light, quick cadence. Take it into an easy run. And the first thing I want to say to people is the minute you start to notice any noticeable change in breath, so whether the breath rate is increasing quite a bit or whether the breath volume is increasing quite a bit, that's when you just bring it back into a walk. And then just do that. Take your time to do that. So it's not about, right, let's set off, run, and then close my mouth. And again, interestingly, just a little story on this one is I did that with a group on the instructor training course I think it's last year or the year before. And we had an Olympic athlete. So it was at Tokyo. Was it Tokyo? The last Olympics, it was Tokyo. And he was the only one who got it. So he was the only one. So he was slowing down before anybody else. So everybody else was running, and then they'd go, yeah, I'm fine. And you could see them, because they were going into that, I need to get a little bit further. I need to be a little bit better than the next person. But he was really tuning into that. yeah, my breath rate is increasing a little bit. So if I just pull it back a bit, breath can calm, and then just ease into it. So really just gently easing into it. So you're doing a really simple warm up. And then once I've got people comfortable with that, I will do the little breath holds, maybe get them to understand a little bit about the benefits of the breath hold. So the more you are comfortable with breathing without breath holds at the very beginning, the more then you explain to them, actually, when you do that little pause for a few steps, you're actually getting more energy. You're squeezing more oxygen from the blood into the tissues. You're getting more CO2 buildup. So you're really doing your cardiovascular training before we then start running, so that when they start running after a few little breath holds, it's like, oh yeah, it's a lot easier. So it's really doing stuff gently and slowly and powerfully. Is that isn't weak. That isn't, oh, I can't run fast, I have to run slow because I'm just breathing through the nose. Another little anecdote, tell me when to stop because I can talk forever. There was a guy who came, my nephew and his wife came over down for dinner, and his half sister brought her boyfriend over for dinner. I'd never met them before. This guy's in his 20s, and we were literally at dinner, and we were talking. He was a really keen runner, and I literally talked to him about cadence, so a nice light quick cadence, and talked to him about nasal breathing. That was it. Didn't do any training with him. And it was about a month later, he texted me and he's like, I've just taken 5 minutes off my 5K. And he said, that's all I've done is I took on board that idea of breathing through the nose, backing off a little bit and quick cadence. And that, do you know what I mean? We didn't do hours and hours of training. He didn't pay me anything. But that was like, and this guy's in his 20s. So he's young. It's quite nice when people like that take things on board and then actually really feel the difference that slowing down to start off with makes you more efficient. And then once you've pulled it back a little bit, then you can put the power behind it. Then you can put the speed behind it.
Totally. And the other thing is, when you first do your physical exercise with your mouth closed, there's a stronger air hunger, which tells you that there's a buildup of carbon dioxide in the blood. But the more you expose yourself to the increased CO2, you reduce the body's sensitivity towards carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is the driver to breathe. So your breathing during physical exercise reduces. So in other words, you train your body to do more with less. One person I was thinking about is Dr. William Hang, and he's an orthodontist. I met him in California. It's going back quite a while. And he just did the Boston City Marathon, and he did it about 3 months ago, whenever it was on. And then the Times wrote an article on it. And at one of the stages, well, he had his mouth taped for the entire marathon. And I'm not sure what age he is, but he's into his 70s. So, you know, when we think about, people might be aghast thinking, well, how on earth could I do nasal breathing? Well, look at William Hang, being able to do the full 26 miles with his mouth closed. Yeah, what do you find anyway when you do your physical exercise? If you were to compare the old you to the new you, what are the benefits? What do you think?
It's a difficult one because, again, I've been lucky in coming from doing no physical exercise to actually then going, oh, I want to be a running coach and do my personal training, and then very early on working with someone who has made me very aware of breathing. So I'm not someone who's had a big aha moment and like, oh, wow, this is wonderful. I've changed from this to this. So I haven't really experienced that major shift. I just remember that first time struggling on the treadmill. I do remember maybe running marathons, but it's interesting, even when I was running marathon back in 2010, I'm looking at pictures and my face is relaxed, my mouth is generally closed. So I don't think, I'm not saying I'm wonderful all the time, do you know what I mean? And I'm certainly not, and there's certainly I'm learning all of the time, but I don't really have a big comparison personally. But what I do see is the comparison in clients, and this is where I'm noticing it, is you see people who just go, oh my God, that's something so simple has made such a difference. So that's where I see the changes. Interesting, just going back to that running the marathon and the mouth tape. Interesting one, because hydration. How did he hydrate himself? So you would have needed, hopefully, to just get some hydration in during that as well.
A few articles that are written online, and just to show people. I think this is going to get much more attention, because it goes back to, you said that you did your personal training. There's plenty of strength and conditioning coaches, and they've never received any instruction on breathing. This one here is Michael. He's a professor, and it's the Department of Management. The title of the article, "The Athlete's Secret Ingredient: The Power of Nasal Breathing." It kind of says it all. It's a review article, and he'll go through all of the different things that the nose does. Observing Roger Federer, age 37, ranked number 3 in men's singles in 2018, and shows Federer's mouth is almost always closed during competitions. On the other hand, Naomi Osaka, winner of the US Open, frequently appeared to be mouth breathing during play between sets and during the award ceremony. However, will her stamina hold up over time? So it's interesting, isn't it, that, okay, this is a 2019 article, and I'll pull up some of the work of George Dallam as well, that the scientists and the people who do write the articles are getting a little bit more interested in it. It's taken a long time, though, hasn't it?
It's definitely taken a long time. And I think one point that is often missed is when we just talk about nasal breathing and mouth breathing, is like there's a difference between gassing out mouth breathing as opposed to just sort of like that quick cleansing and clearing. And this is one thing that a lot of clients, again, will say, it's like, oh, I can't open my mouth. And it's like, actually, when you do get to that point where there is a buildup of CO2, use it either as strength training to build your resilience to CO2, or if you're in competition, like you always say that people often miss, is like, breathe out through the mouth. So there is a difference between mouth breathing in just, and this is why I think the Qigong is so nice, is it's like, it's cleansing and clearing, it's clearing out. And also nasal breathing is like, if you're pulling as much air as possible through the nose, it's like, hang on a minute. So that's, again, I think that's something that often when we're looking at these studies and it talks about mouth breathing and nasal breathing, it's like, how are they comparing it? And it's always like photographs as well. I think that's not a great thing, is when somebody says, oh, look, he's got his mouth open. And it could be like, or look, he's a terrible runner, he's going to heel strike, and then at the next point he would have landed on the ball of the foot. So we've got to be, as a coach, I'm really careful not to be judgmental from that point of view, and really highlight the nuances of efficient nasal breathing. But as you say, that important element of like, it's just slow down a bit, so that you have, the key word in there was stamina and endurance, wasn't it? It's like, you want to be able to keep going and not gas out.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's not that we're advocating nasal breathing to the point that we go blue. But it's about gently using the nose, breathing through the nose, to add an extra load onto breathing, to cause the body to make those adaptations. So I'm just going to put up another paper as well, because sometimes I think it's important for. This is a very interesting article here. It was published in about a year ago, just over a year. Breath Tools, a synthesis of evidence-based breathing strategies to enhance human running. It's quite a scientific article. They do cover, of course, respiration. They cover nose breathing, respiratory muscle strength, etc. Respiration is a limiting factor. What can you do? Because it's breathlessness, that sensation of breathlessness is often the limiting factor in sports, but yet people often think, well, it's due to poor conditioning, but it can be due to dysfunctional breathing patterns. And I'm going to just pull up another couple of papers here. This is George Dallam, who's done a little bit of research, which is great to see the scientists getting on board, because of course that's what we want. The effect of nasal versus oral breathing on VO2 max and physiological. Let's look at this for a moment. Oh, it's brought me through today. Can you see that now?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see that. Yeah.
So basically, this table here is interesting enough.
Oh, I can't
Yeah.
see a table. I can just see the
Oh, okay.
title.
So yeah, so it changed. So I'm going to jump back out of there and I'm going to go into the PDF and I'll just scroll back on this. So down to this table.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, I can see that now.
So they got 10 recreational athletes. They had them breathe through their nose exclusively for 6 months, and then they tested them nasal breathing versus mouth breathing during a graded exercise test. And they found that with nose breathing, they did wear a nasal dilator, which is fair enough. It helps open up the airways, especially if somebody has a compromised nasal airway. That with nasal breathing, they were able to achieve 100% of the work rate intensity as with mouth breathing, but they had 22% less ventilation. So you spoke earlier on about the biomechanics, and if you've got good movement from a biomechanical point of view, you're going to save energy.
Mm.
This also, if we have good breathing, we're going to save energy because it takes quite a bit of oxygen to support the breathing muscles. And even as we're sitting here, maybe about 2 to 3% of the oxygen that we take in is supporting the breathing muscles. But the more we work our breathing muscles, the more oxygen that needs to support them. And if we have poor breathing patterns, that of course increases. And during high intensity or maximum exercise, it could be as high as 15%. But if somebody has dysfunctional breathing, it could be 20%, it could be 25%. So it's something to be thinking about, breathing. What can we do? And when you think about breathing per se, you're talking about the biomechanics, the biochemistry, the pace of breathing. And the other aspect then is, in terms of the biomechanics, is both the strength and the function of the diaphragm. How
So
much time do you normally kind of break it down? Because people might feel, oh my God, it's so complex.
yeah, again, it depends on client, depends on what the program is. But one of the things I focus on when I start off with biomechanics, I don't necessarily start with the diaphragm.
Hmm?
And I start with the spine. Because actually, again, if you think where the rib cage is attached, it's attached to the spine. So actually, if we're in this position, because we're on a computer a lot of the time, then you can feel the diaphragm. You can most probably breathe light and slow, but you're restricted here. So also you can be in this position here, the diaphragm's in the wrong place. So actually, for me, again, goes back to what I learned from Danny in Qi running and the whole Qigong. It's about that lengthening from the crown, because that lifts the spine, which puts you in the right place to start off with. Because it's all well and good to talk about the diaphragm. It's not very easy to feel the diaphragm. It's not like, as you know, it's not like if I go like that, I can feel what it feels like to lift a weight. I know what that feels like on my muscles. Can you feel the diaphragm? Not really. But getting the diaphragm in the right place is my starting point. So whether that's sitting, whether that's standing, bamboo in the wind, straight away, let your body find its natural spot. Spine lengthens, diaphragm sits in the right place. Oh no, yeah, I can feel that movement. And then when I'm talking about true deep breath, a lot of people, when we talk about deep breath, everybody goes. And I remember one of the first instructor trainings we did, and it was like, actually, it's not about volume, it's about where you feel it. So I will actually not focus on the diaphragm. I'll come a little bit below the belly button and go, actually, can you feel in your lower abdomen as you breathe? How does that area respond? And then if they can breathe true deep breath, they go, yeah, I don't have to breathe a big breath. And then it's like, well, there's the diaphragm, there's the pelvic floor. So again, it's all about experiential first. Feel the ribs in the right place, feel the spine in the right place. And then I'll get them to feel their diaphragm. Breathing into the back is a massive thing that a lot of people come back to. I never even thought I could breathe into the back. So then getting the back moving, getting a little bit of movement in the back. Because if there's no flexibility, if there's no movement here in the rib cage, if we can't rotate and we can't get the spine in the right place, It's like the diaphragm's not going to work as efficiently as it can be. So it's setting up the structure first. And also biomechanics about how do I land on the ground? Because that, of course, will affect your breathing. That's why it's important. Like for running, it's going to feel very different when you're running to if you're lying on the floor and breathing. So biomechanic, whole body.
That's so cool. Well, I'm just conscious of time. And
Yeah.
where do you think it's all going? Breathing. It's
I think people, hopefully people are realizing that it's not exercise. I think exercise is changing. There's a brilliant book by Dan Lieberman called Exercised, where he's talking about actually it's about movement and it's about how we live our everyday lives. And he looks at the Tarahumara tribe, and it's like they don't go training for their ultra marathon. And I think a lot of exercise in the Western world is still set in the 80s, like we do now, cardio or all of that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong in that, but I think a movement forwards, or certainly what I see as my sort of like my mission, or how I want to help people, is to realize that you don't have to kill yourself to actually feel good. And as you say, move with ease, breathe with ease, be confident in how you are feeling, how you're moving, how you're relating to people. That is for me what is key about how you thrive rather than how you survive, and how you just feel comfortable in what you're doing. And if you can't do something, I didn't do my breath work this morning, oh no, I failed. That's not going to work, because it's just going to put people off doing their breath work. And I know we've had this conversation about breath work. Is that the right word to use?
I don't like it.
People don't like the word. And breath training, and
I
even
like breath training. Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
It's
It's
true.
like breath training.
Yeah, you have to do something.
But of course, we have to train and we have to learn a skill. But again, that's why cultivating energy is such a nice way of putting it. How can I cultivate energy and enjoy what I'm doing? I had one client the other morning who's like, I was putting up a blind and I had to drill into like a metal lintel to put his blind up in the kitchen. And he was like, I was focusing on using the energy I need to use, but not over tensing and breathing easy. And for me, that is like, that's worked. If somebody's putting a blind up, they're doing their breath work. And that I think is hopefully where it's going to. I think people are coming back to that, back to basics, back to simple stuff, hopefully.
Great stuff. People, if they want to hear more about you, Cray.
Adventures. The website is adventuresinmovement.com. And I do the OA Oxygen Advantage Instructor training. We do a retreat. I do a retreat with Andrew Ritchie in Scotland, and we do the instructor training. And then they get you, which is fantastic. So all of the work, the online stuff that you do is always the core of any instructor training that we do. We also do retreats. I do running in the Costa Brava, which is nice, which we do Qigong. We focus a little bit on breath work, but that's very much an experiential retreat. So that's sort of like the basics of what I do. Do daily morning classes as well in Qigong and breath work. So lots going on.
And do you have Instagram?
Yeah, Gray Caws. I haven't been on. I've had a little bit of an Instagram social media break because I think you scroll through and there's like there's so much on.
It's absolutely. Yeah, I'm not a fan, even though we have it ourselves and we use it to get out our message. And that's anybody listening, how easy have the big tech giants. They've really got a grip of us, haven't they? Yeah. When you think of 13 and 14-year-old kids and all they're doing is just scrolling, aimlessly looking into a screen. Anyway, it's another conversation.
That's another podcast. But yeah, I think with Instagram and with social media, I aim to be, when I'm on there, just authentic and be there for a reason and give somebody a reason rather than just going, oh, look at me doing breath work. So yeah, but Instagram, Gray Caws.
Great stuff. All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Have a good rest of your day.